Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Green Cover Podcast, where we have really interesting conversations with some of the top regenerative producers and experts all over the world. And join us as we learn how to regenerate God's creation for future generations together. You know, a lot of times people ask me here at Green Cover, they say, "Hey, Keith, how far do you ship seed? Do you ship seed internationally, or is it just in the U.S.?" And the answer to that is it's mostly in the U.S., but we have done some international work. And my guest today is probably our customer that's the furthest away. Mr. Raymond Epp is from Japan, which is a long ways away to ship seed, but we've done it. We shipped a container of seed to help him get started in his business. And the cool thing about Ray, he's from Nebraska originally. And so just a fascinating guy, a fascinating story, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So Raymond, welcome to the Green Cover Podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Keith. It's just a real honor to join together with you and all the other guests that you had on this podcast over this last little while. So it's really special for me to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, great. We appreciate that. So I gave just a little bit of a teaser there. How did you end up from Henderson, Nebraska to the wild regions of Japan doing regenerative ag? So just to be fair, this is probably the top regenerative ag producer in the whole country of Japan. So he's helping lead the movement there, which again is just so cool. So give us a little bit of your background. Tell us how you got there.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a small Mennonite community in Henderson, just down I-80 from you, about an hour and a half from where you live. And gosh, I never thought I would do anything else but farm in Henderson when I was growing up. I attended the University of Nebraska, and I began to feel in my studies that, gosh, there's something that's not quite right about the way in which we think about economics. And also I began to become aware of, atrazine ending up in the groundwater and nitrates in the water. I felt something in my gut saying that we need to start making a turn in the way in which we practice agriculture. This is more than 45 years ago. And, having discussions in the family at the time, had a fairly successful farming operation to think about making a turn to organic or some kind of, the word regenerative wasn't used at that time. Had some conflicts in the family. Didn't know exactly what to do, so I began to think, like there's problems with the agriculture, some things I'm learning. But then I had this experience in 1979 of going with a group of church people to Wichita Falls, Texas, to clean up after a big tornado that devastated like 6 square miles of the city. It was the first time I'd ever seen anybody in poverty or, have lost everything. Mm-hmm. And it had a huge impact, and it wanted me to devote my life to being to service. And also at that same time, I read Wes Jackson's book, New Roots for Agriculture, thinking about how we can mimic nature in the way in which we farm. And also, a big issue at that time was the first ever peacetime draft registration. So coming from a historic peace church, I was wondering, how am I going to respond, to this draft issue? So I brought these 3 issues together of wanting to be servant, of wanting to be a peacemaker, and still have a deep concern for agriculture. I wanted that to form my vocation. And since I couldn't do it in my home farm, my parents said, absolutely no way. Can't do that here. So I left my farm, my community, my country, and I went to Canada to study. I got a biblical studies degree. That's actually my undergraduate degree is in biblical studies. So I spent 12 years living in Canada, kind of in exile. It kind of felt that way, kind of away from the farm. I felt if God wants me to be involved in agriculture and farming again, he'll find a way.
Yeah. And he did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in Canada, like it was important, to learn and make these connections, intellectually, but I also had opportunities then to also be very practical. I was involved in a project called Stewards of the Land, in which during the late 80s, early 90s, there was a farm crisis in Canada. And I think farmers in Manitoba and Saskatchewan lost, a million acres to the banks. They were foreclosed on, and there was farm suicides, domestic violence, and kids were subject to violence. And you know, as I got farmers to start telling their stories, they had no place to go. And so I provided an opportunity for a safe space for farmers to start sharing their stories about what's going on. And want to find out that, this kind of frustration and anger, it's not because these farmers are bad people. It's part of this kind of system of, I called it systemic violence, that is just really pressing in and wanting to crush people. And so I was wanting to encourage people to take this, you know, anger, and turn it into doing something good. So we started working at connecting city people and farmers with community-supported agriculture projects. We started a 200-member community-supported agriculture pilot project in Manitoba. It took 4 months to organize, and there was just this massive support from both city people and farmers to want to participate in this project. At that same time, in around 1990, I joined with a group of 5 families in my church to start a bakery called Tallgrass Prairie Bread Company. And we were buying grain directly from farmers and turning it into bread. And, our mission was, to support local farmers, to also support, stewardship agriculture, and to provide good, healthy food for people and living wages for our workers. And it turned into just this wonderful, wonderful project. 25 years after it started, I went back to Winnipeg, and this bakery is turned the way in which it's spoken of in the city. It's Winnipeg's beloved bakery. Like, has 62 employees now. They're last time I heard, they were baking using 12.5 tons of wheat a month that they were milling by themselves. And it's just,
What a great story. And this was 30 years ago when you did all this.
35 years ago. Yeah.
Before it was all the rage. So you definitely were a man ahead of your time. So I love it. That's great.
And during that time is when I met my wife. She came from Japan for a visitor exchange program. And we ended up working together in the bakery. And she also helped me with the organizing work with farmers. So I got interested in her and came to Japan and provided, some workshops, for the Mennonite churches here in Japan about what the work I was doing in Canada. And they started reflecting on their own experience and said, gosh, those same problems are here too. Maybe we need to start a project in Japan. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I ended up here, coming to Japan.
Well, that's a great story, and just again to kind of help set a little bit of the context for folks. Tell us just a little bit about the climate that you're farming in, the crops that you can grow there, just so people have a bit of an understanding of what you're growing there and what your climate allows.
Yeah. Our climate here, we have snow melts end of March. We have about a meter of snow, maybe about 3 feet of snow cover in the wintertime. We have about 35 to 40 inches of annual rainfall, which includes snow.
Hmm.
Um, so because we're within an hour of the ocean, we don't have huge temperature swings. Um, the last fall freeze would be in November. So we have a pretty open window, a growing season, and high temperatures of maybe in the 90s as the high. So no hail. Um,
That sounds
you know,
pretty good.
it sounds pretty good. It's all rain-fed farming here.
Yeah.
We don't have any, no, there's no irrigation. So, what can we grow here? Like just all kinds of vegetable crops are grown in this region. Our neighbor has an orchard. We're growing apples, grapes, uh, wheat, soybeans, short season corn. We don't have, like 100 to 110 day corn is about the longest season corn that you can grow here. Um, yeah, it's kind of we're at the same latitude as the about 42 degrees. It's maybe a little bit farther north than where you're located, but
Hmm.
it's basically the same latitude. So
Well, it sounds
yeah,
pretty nice. We're recording this the middle of December. It's 60 degrees today here in Nebraska, but 36 hours ago it was 4 degrees. So I'm sure you miss Nebraska weather.
yeah.
And so when you went to Japan, how long did it take you to get to the farm that you're at now and kind of get that set up? Did you start that right away, or were there some other kind of in between steps?
No in between steps. It was there was like 6 or 7 families in the Mennonite churches in the city of Sapporo who really wanted to start a rural community and start addressing some of these problems in agriculture in Japan. So I thought I can come here and maybe in 5, 10 years, help get a project going, get it started. I'm kind of good at starting things, so I thought I'd kind of help out here for a little while, and then, well, to make a long story short, we had four boys were born in our family, and they started getting involved in the schools here, and I became attached to this land. It was just
Sure.
the farm's name is called Meadow Village, and I developed a relationship with this place, and I just couldn't see myself leaving.
Love that. Love that story of how God used those experiences in Canada to really help you get a movement started in Japan. And it's interesting that the problems that the U.S. farm economy was facing in the 80s was also happening in Canada and happening in Japan. So sometimes we get so isolated in thinking that woe is me, the problems are all just here and all around, but really the problems are kind of universal, but so are the solutions, as you're finding out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're finding, there is my, my background, as I said, was in biblical studies, and after being here for about 10 years, I felt, like, there's just all of these things that are continuing to press in on us. And I decided that I'm going to go back to school. I need to find language in which to communicate in a better way with farmers and with policymakers. And so I went back to seminary in 2005. And there was some families that were moving that had come to Japan from the States, that wanted to, his guy's wife was American, but they wanted their kids to learn Japanese. So they spent a year on the farm, which allowed me to go to seminary, and I wrote a thesis
Probably felt like a
on
book.
yeah, it was 170 pages long. It was
That's a
called it was called the politics of food, in
Ah,
which I looked at the food system as a form of structural violence, um, politically as a, a totalitarian system, and biblically as an issue of the principalities and powers at work in this world that are at one time good, they're fallen, but they can be redeemed. So I use that thesis all the time in my work.
yeah, no kidding. I'm thinking that you should be publishing that as a book. That could be a big hit right now.
Mm.
So, moved to Japan, started the farm there, and then I assume you started out as regenerative, organic. You brought all those principles with you, so you did that from the very beginning.
Mhm. Nope.
How,
The
how did
most
it
important,
start? How did it progress?
yeah, yeah. The most important thing in, I was the first foreigner, probably in Hokkaido, I don't, that, came and started a farm. So the most important thing, first off, was to develop a relationship with the neighbors. And
Hmm.
I had the fortunate experience that two of our neighbors, um, one of them was an Anglican, second generation Anglican. And what he did is he organized all of the farmers in the neighborhood to be my teacher. So
Really?
if you need, yeah. So if you
That's
need to learn something about growing rice, here's the farmer that you need to go talk to learn about rice growing. Any questions? I had a potato grower sensei, a teacher, who just passed away a couple of days ago. Yeah, I could go to them anytime, and they would help me. So another farmer, which is just two houses down at that time, he came to me while I was fixing up the house here the first year, and he was an agriculture trainee in California in the 1950s, so he knew some English. And we had a long conversation about Japanese culture and stuff and how I'd fit in here. It was, the first year, first month that I was here. And then he told me at the end, he said, if you want to become just like all of the other farmers in this area, you may as well go back to the United States. I want you to do something interesting, which is exactly the opposite of traditional Japanese thinking. You need to fit in and be like everybody else. Don't stick out. So he was just a wonderful soul. So I just really am grateful to him for his words of advice, and I followed it.
so. Yeah, that's really cool. I want you to do something interesting. So, what did you do interesting that was, different from the traditional way of farming, and how, just talk a little bit about how that interesting difference kind of morphed into, the influence that you've had over, not just the
Yeah.
region, but the country.
Hmm. Yeah, like first of all, I wanted to learn how everybody. I need to learn about the soils. I need to learn about the weather. I need to know about the agronomic practices of Japan for growing these different crops. So, the first year, I basically did everything the way everybody else did, farmed around the area,
Hmm.
and I learned, the basic, methods of farming for here. And slowly over time, I did experimenting to start shifting the farm towards organic farming methods. If I could succeed on a small scale, then I scaled up. I didn't take any big risks. I also needed to make the farm keep the farm's appearance like everyone else's. Like I can't have a weed patch, or else that just doesn't fit into the neighborhood standards. So I was very careful about those kind of things. So slowly moving from to organic. I basically shifted the whole farm over to organic production. I made fermented fertilizer, called bokashi fertilizer. Steve Driver talks about that. Steve Diver from Kentucky. He's familiar with that at one of the workshops at Acres USA conference. Um, I was fermenting like 50, 60 tons of this bokashi fertilizer during the wintertime, out of chicken manure and rice bran and different ingredients, local ingredients. I got some for bacteria from the forest, to inoculate the piles so that the bacteria from the forest would also, when I spread it onto the fields, it would be returning, increasing the biological diversity of the soils. So was
And
doing some of these kind of regenerative practices. Yeah.
yeah, and so this would have been what, like in the 90s at this point?
Late 90s, early 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So still
Yeah.
still 25 plus years ago that
Yeah.
you were doing, because it sounds like this could be a regenerative farmer right now today that's just, look at all these things I'm doing, but you were doing them, 25, and you learned from people that had been doing it 25, 50 years before that. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
we just display so much hubris when we think that we're the first ones to come up with this kind of stuff. A lot of it is we're trying to rediscover what our ancestors would have known and applying it with the benefit of some of the technology that we have today to make it even better.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. Some of the bottlenecks that I began to run into with this kind of method of farming was that I was purchasing compost off the farm, and the pH of the compost was 8.4 to 8.8. And so my soils were slowly, you know, moving into the range 7.5, like in just, that was a limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And also, with the mad cow disease, I didn't have access, to bone meal. I was wondering, like, if I can't use compost, I can't use bone meal, well, then how am I going to provide fertility for my soils? And I started thinking maybe cover crop, would, like growing a clover or something like that. I wasn't thinking about diverse mixes of cover crops at that point, but can I grow my carbon in the field rather than thinking about applying it? And as I was getting older, like I thought, this maybe be a little bit more efficient as well, labor wise.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So then in 2018, I think my friend Jay Gertzen came to a conference at Green Cover, in which you hosted Gabe Brown.
Yep.
And Gabe had just written his book, From Dirt to Soil. And so I had sent Jay some of my writings about seeds, and in return, he sent back Dirt to Soil. So I read that book, and I, gosh, what I had read about from Wes Jackson, nearly 35 years or 25 years before, or more, that, one of the questions that Wes had is, can the prairie provide its own defenses against insects and disease? Can it sponsor its own fertility, through, diversity? And I thought, Gabe is writing about diverse cover crops. Of course, this is the key that I've been looking for. And so in 2019, I purchased a Great Plains no-till drill here in Japan. They're being sold. And also that's when I ordered from the local cooperative cover crop seeds, mixed cover crop seeds. One of the huge, it worked really, really well. But one of the real bottlenecks for the adoption of cover crop seeds I saw was the seeds from the local cooperative, have seed coatings on it. Probably, I'm not sure what they are, but probably there's neonics and fungicides on the seeds. There's not much variety. They have plant variety protection, so the farmers can't multiply the seeds if they wanted to. Uh, and lastly, they're just prohibitively expensive.
Hmm.
They all come in 1 kilogram plastic bags. Can you imagine, Keith, delivering cover
It's a
crop
lot of
seeds in
bags. That is a lot of
that's a
bags.
lot of bags. Yeah. Yeah. So I there this is the bottleneck. I was and a barrier to the adoption of cover crops. So that was, I think it was the following year, 2019 to 2020, somewhere around there, that I ordered my first small batch of seed from Green Cover.
And I tell people this all the time, that we take so much for granted. And it's funny, we had a missionary friend speak at our church yesterday. He's from Honduras, and he says, "Oh, here in America, you have a switch for everything. If it's too hot, you flip a switch. If it's too cold, you flip a switch. If it's dark, you flip a switch." And really, what he's talking about is we have so many conveniences, and it's literally at the flip of a switch. You want a diverse cover crop mix? Well, flip a switch, and we can get that right out to you.
Mhm.
We just take so much for granted that people in other countries, they don't have access to the seeds or to the knowledge or to the equipment. And so and it's very difficult for us to ship seed. We'd love to ship seed to all these countries, but it's very, very difficult with import export rules and laws and everything. So when you started at a small scale, then it eventually got to a bigger scale. Maybe talk just a little bit about that progression and what we ended up with, and what's your end goal with that whole thing with your cover crop seed business. And then I do still want to get into some of the work you've been doing with policy and with promotion and education as well.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, with the seeds, like for myself, with importing the small amount of seed that we did the first year, like whenever I work with government people, I really want to develop a close personal relationship with the person that I'm working with. And I'm extremely grateful for the amount of time and the effort that he makes in order to work together with me to make this import of seeds possible. And I want to learn as much as I possibly can. And I'm also always extremely grateful for the work that they do. And when we first imported the small amount of seeds, I had to wait at the port with the guy as they were waiting for the seeds to be taken out of the container. So had an opportunity to talk to him about mixed cover crops and how that's different than from growing single species cover crops. And he became extremely interested. He was really, really excited about helping me with this project. So yeah, I've developed this really, really good relationship with him. So then when we moved into getting a larger quantity of seeds, like we ran into all kinds of different problems, but he was right there with us and helping us, each step of the way, so we can get the customs clearance and all the testing done. So very, very helpful. Very, very fine gentleman.
Yeah, and that you're right. That just underscores the importance of building relationships and not burning bridges and not getting frustrated because somebody's just trying to do their job, even if you think, well, that's a dumb rule. Well, it's still a rule. They got to follow it. And so don't blame that guy.
Yeah.
And so I like how you forge those relationships and are working within that system, because we did eventually, ship that whole container. And so, we shipped you a whole container of seed. And so then obviously you didn't plant all of that on your own ground. What all did you do with that then?
Okay. What was it in 2000, after COVID, 2020, 21, 2022, I was on your green cover newsletter list, and I saw that there was a premiere of this movie, To Which We Belong, in which Keith Burns was going to be in Lincoln with the producer, for a premiere, the Lincoln, the Nebraska premiere of this movie. And I took a look at that short version of the movie, and I felt immediately, that movie, we have to show that in Japan. And so I emailed Pamela Bowl right away and asked him if I could get the distribution rights to this movie. And so a friend of mine, he subtitled the movie with another one of his friends. And we started showing that movie in the fall of 2022. And, there was no word for regenerative agriculture in the Japanese language prior to 2022. So there was one word that was environmentally renewing agriculture that was developed by the translator of Gabe Brown's book, which also came out in 2022 in the Japanese, Dirt to Soil, the book. And our movie came out in the fall. And we decided to translate regenerative agriculture as earth renewing agriculture. Daichisaisei no Gyo. So rather than just that which surrounds us, it's the earth itself that is renewing the world. The power.
I like that.
Yeah. So that has become the dominant way in which regenerative agriculture is being talked about in Japan now.
That's really cool. And for those who aren't familiar with it, To Which We Belong was a soil health documentary made by a wonderful team of folks, and they came out before COVID, and I think they recorded all this, and our farm was featured on there, but along with, I don't know, probably 6, 7, 8 other farms as well, some in Africa. Really interesting part with the guy growing kelp off the East Coast, and just really, really well done. I mean, the cinematography on it was just outstanding. So if you haven't watched it, I'd certainly encourage you to. I think you can rent it really cheap on Amazon Prime, or it might even be on Netflix. But search for that. Try to find that, because it's not only a really good representation of what regenerative agriculture can do, but it really leaves you with a sense of hope, and not a sense of, the sky is falling. They do a great job talking about the problems, but spending more time on the solutions, which I really appreciated.
Yes. That's what struck me about me.
You showed that hundreds of times in Japan, right?
Yeah, when I first saw that, I thought, gosh, if we could show that at maybe 20 or 30 places, that would be a real success. But once we started showing that movie, it just spread by word of mouth. I think it's been shown in close to 500 different locations all across Japan, with more than 11,000 people have seen this movie. And that was the first step. We have to introduce a word. We also have to introduce a sense of hope, as you said, Keith. And the other thing that really struck me about the movie was that the people in the movie weren't waiting around for a government subsidy to fall from the sky. Here's the problem. This is what we have done to start addressing the problems on our own, and working together with our families and our neighbors to start making a difference. And that kind of spirit is what I really wanted to instill into the farmers and consumers here in Japan. We have to start acting before the government does. We can't wait around.
No, because if you wait for the government to do it, you're probably not going to like what they come up with for a solution anyway.
Yeah. So that was the first step.
Obviously, the message was well received.
Very well received, yes. So that was the first step. And then the next step after all of these showings, farmers were wondering, okay, there's a lot of talk in the movie about mindset change.
Hmm.
We need to think differently in order to change our practices. So, how do we go about practicing regenerative agriculture? So, it was the following year that a friend of mine from Osaka, we started an educational program with 5 farmers. Let's start experimenting on our own farms with mixed cover crops, with this new mindset. How does it start affecting the way in which we practice agriculture? How do we make decisions on the farm to address, weed pressures or fertility, insects, diseases, in a more holistic kind of way? And these farmers didn't have no-till drills and didn't have roller crimpers, and so let's get creative. What do we have? Rather than think about, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. Well, how can we do something creative with what we have? And these guys were just amazingly creative, and they did wonderful things. And so my job is, teaching things about how soils function and just cheering these guys on.
Hmm.
They're amazing once you turn them loose, so they started sharing their experiences with other farmers in their neighborhoods. The following year, there was 25 other farmers that joined our education program. In the third year, another 25, and they're inviting their neighbors. They're cutting down their costs. They're finding their yields are actually going up. So they've had some really, really positive experiences. Of course, they had some small scale failures as well. We encourage farmers to do things on a small scale, experiment. And so we have a line group. Do you have the app Line in the United States? It's a social network where
Okay.
farmers can share what they're learning, take photos, take a video. This is what I'm learning on my farm, this week.
Hmm.
So you can get 25 years of farm experience in 1 year by
Yeah.
being part of the group. So they're really excited.
So then has that educational group, has that kind of grown? Obviously you've got the social media sharing. Are you doing conferences and events and things like that now where people can come together in person and share these things? Are you bringing in any outside speakers to, further expand their minds and encourage them? What is that looking like in Japan right now?
Yeah. Last year, Chuck Schembre from
Oh, yeah.
Understanding Ag, uh, Chuck saw the photo of the shipment of seeds on your website or
Yes.
your social media post. And so he contacted me, and he said he was coming to Japan. So we had Chuck Schembre speak to our group, My Regenerative Journey, and he really inspired farmers and to really take this next step. So Chuck has been here this past summer. Gabe Brown was invited to a Japanese government African development conference, but Gabe Brown refused. He just said, "I'm just too busy. I can't come." But there's this guy Ray up in Hokkaido that I think could do a good job addressing your topic. So I was asked to go to Tokyo to speak to this African development conference. Um, we
So
don't have very
you
many.
start by reading Gabe's book and you finish by doing his speaking engagements. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabe. Yeah.
Great. So has that led to other opportunities to kind of work your way up into the government policy? I know that you talked to me at one point about, you were, helping write some seed policies because there really wasn't a lot of seed policy in Japan other than you can't do much, So talk a little bit about how you've been able to leverage these opportunities that you've had into having influence at some policy levels.
Mm. Yeah, a few years, was it about 6 years ago, the Japanese government changed their seed laws for major um, crops like rice, wheat, barley. I'm not sure if soybeans was part of the. Um, there was public plant breeding that was happening, like the kind of the plant seed law discussions that are happening in Japan like 6, 7 years ago were the same kind of discussions that were happening in the United States in the early 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
So it just, learning from Jack Kloppenberg's work, First the Seed, and also from Pat Mooney's work, he's from Canada, on seed laws. I just wanted to see from historical experience how the privatization of seeds influences the kind of questions that get asked on how seed breeding. What are the questions that seed breeders ask? And if the seed companies are owned by chemical companies, well, we can achieve a goal either through variety improvement, or we can, if we breed out disease resistance or insect resistance, well, we have a chemical that we can sell to the farmer to meet that. So, the kind of questions that plant breeders ask changes depending upon the needs or the profits of the company that owns the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
So it changes. I was just suggesting that it's very, very important for farmers and citizens to be involved in questions regarding plant variety development. So if we want regenerative plants that respond to a regenerative soil ecosystem, many of the plant varieties that we have now are incapable of developing a mycorrhizal fungal association. So we need plant breeding that will function well in a regenerative soil. So those are the kind of discussions.
Yeah, yeah. And when we sent you that cover crop seed, we worked really hard and were very careful to send all non-GMO and all open pollinated and all non-protected varieties so that you could take them and maybe not necessarily do a whole crop breeding program, but just by planting them over and over again, you're going to epigenetically shift those seeds to fit your environment. Have you started doing that? Are you growing those things out and harvesting the seed? And are you seeing any changes to have those fit, your environment and your context better?
The this past year was our first year of selling, the container of seeds. We planted, amongst our farm members, we planted 900 acres of cover crops, mixed cover crops. So I'm hoping, to develop a seed production network similar, to green cover. Was 60 to 70% of the seeds farmers are producing for you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I shared that story with farmers, and at this point, the farmers have no experience of growing some of these cover crops, as for seed production. So they're a little hesitant, to want to participate in something like that at this point in this first year. But as they see these cover crops, they're just amazed. The oats, the Jerry oats, like the stems of them are like the size of my little finger. The oat varieties here in Japan are just really, really scrawny. The root system on the Jerry oats is just amazing in comparison to the varieties that we have access to here. So, they're really impressed with the cover crop seeds, and it's amazing what they've been able to do. seen some good results.
So do you see that maybe you'll have to do some small plot demonstrations of here's how we can grow this out for seed production, and kind of do some of that experimenting yourself, or do you have a few guys that will do it, try some of this on small scales?
Uh, Crops like oats and rye, it's not a problem to be able to
Yeah.
gain access to that. So like the grain crops, that's not a problem. But I'm wondering like for daikon radish seed, for example, can we grow that? The farmers here grow rapeseed for harvesting, which is a much smaller seed than
Yeah.
daikon, so it shouldn't be a problem. But it's just the kind of psychological barrier of this is something new, so okay, having that I
Huh.
can spirit, so
So assuming then that you do get some acres of some of these things grown, and you'll likely find some other locally adapted things that you can
mm,
utilize, hopefully. Are you planning to set up, like a seed cleaning operation, and because I know you can, blend seeds and stuff now, but you'll have to, you'll have to store it, and you have to process it,
hmm
and you have to test it, and all of that. Or is that
yes.
all part of kind of the future plans there?
Well, right now we're in the we're in the midst of building a 2,500 square foot storage facility. Um, we have a small scale clipper cleaner, and I just purchased a color sorter, a
Oh,
Satake
yes, nice.
color sorter.
Well, you're ahead of us. We haven't got one of those yet. So,
Okay, well, maybe I can get you a good deal on one.
that'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, we're hopefully. I'm been was in China earlier this year and was looking at getting a large carding machine. I have some experience in construction, um, and using this carding machine to card wool and make sheep wool insulation, and have our storage facility insulated with sheep wool insulation. So get that a lot cheaper than glass wool, and it's also
Uh,
more ecologically sound. We can grow the wool right on our fields. So yeah, it's amazing. Like all kinds of the gifts of God's creation. Not only is food, but fiber, insulation. Like we're surrounded by God's grace.
Amen.
With this new mind, with
That's
this new
great.
mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that, and you're continuing down the path of education, not just for the people in your group, but for yourself, because you're continually translating things. I think we had Nicole Masters here at our farm this summer for a 2 day. You would have loved that.
Mm.
She was here for 2 days doing we called it
Uh,
Nexus in the Field event.
yeah.
But you translated her book, and
hmm
you're signed up in her course now too. Is that correct?
Yes. As of September of this year, I I signed on to the Create course, and I'm in the process of learning to be a Regen Ag coach, so I can in more in depth help the farmers uh, learn how to do soil health assessments of their soils, and take the steps to help shift away from the high chemical usage.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I want to train these farmers then to start. I'm not going to be able to do this forever, so I would like to, train some next generation that they can also be involved in the coaching so that this idea can spread. Yeah, the young farmers that I have working with me, they said when I asked them about their goals, well, of course they want to shift their own farms, but they also are telling me they want regenerative agriculture to be the new normal in Japan. So they have huge goals. So I just feel like I want to help in the process of preparing them to carry out this great work.
Yeah,
Yeah, we you mentioned about Nicole. Well, 2 years ago, I visited Nicole, and this is her book, For the Love of Soil, in Japanese. It just was released 3 weeks ago. Took 2 years to get translated, but now her book, For the Love of Soil, is available in Japanese. So
That's great.
I've had a
And,
hand in helping to translate that. So
for sure. And, you use the term coach, which I really like. And I know Nicole, in fact, our new soil health resource guide, the 12th edition, will be coming out in January. It's going to the printers this week. There's an article in there from Nicole, and it's entitled, Agriculture Does Not Need More Experts, We Need More Coaches. And it just kind of talks about that philosophy of being a coach versus an expert, and how that just translates to longer term benefits, and people learning more for the long term. And so if you're interested in that type of thing, folks, you can get on our website and get a copy of that resource guide after the first of the years, when those are usually available. But a great article in there from a really smart lady that has been all over the world and has seen all sorts of things, and really has probably as good a perspective as anybody on how regenerative ag looks all around the world. And and that's just the cool thing, is that we're not just seeing a movement here. You're seeing it in Japan. She's seeing it all over. So what a wonderful thing that we can all work together, and having technology like this where we can share each other's stories with folks and encourage people. I think that's just really neat.
yeah,
So
yeah, like I just on on Nicole, like I just find that working with farmers, it's about less than half of the problem of, if you want to call it a problem, of shifting to regenerative agriculture is technical. It's like, how do we deal with our neighbors, the family dynamics, in wanting to shift and make a difference. Oftentimes farmers are saying, like, I'm concerned, like, if we start growing mixed cover crops, our fields are going to look different than all of our neighbors, and we're going to be looked upon as either being lazy or just different, and we just can't deal with the social pressures of that. So yeah, being group, helping support one another in that work.
Yeah, I just read an article on LinkedIn, I think, and its premise was that when you're going to make a shift like this from conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture, 50% of the shift is your mindset, 40% of the shift is in setting up the right system, and then 10% of it is actually implementing the practices. But for most of us, we try to start with that 10% first, and if you don't have the mindset, if you don't have the systems built, that's where you just are continually frustrated. You're continually banging your head against the wall, and things don't work because you're trying to do the practices in a system that wasn't designed for it, with a mindset that's not prepared for it.
That's excellent. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. I'm going to contact that author and see if we can get that into next year's Soil Health Resource Guide, because it was just really well written, very intelligent, and well thought out. So, Ray, as we kind of bring this to a close on this episode, I'm curious, in Japan, when a farmer comes to you and says, I saw the movie, I read the book, see what you're doing, I'm really interested in doing this, how do I get started? Where do I start? Because that's a pretty common question here in the U.S. Curious as to what advice you would give a Japanese farmer as they want to get into, and I love the term, earth healing agriculture.
Yeah, we really encourage them to develop a social network. Also, we point them in the direction of, whatever, if they can find whatever resources that they have on regenerative agriculture to learn things on their own. but the importance of being part of a social network. So we really invite them to join my regenerative journey, so that they can learn this peer-to-peer farmer learning. I find to be the most important way in which farmers can learn about shifting their practices. I personally like to work at creating a safe environment for where people can learn together, and also teach about how soils function. So knowing how soils function, having a safe working environment, and a place where there can be peer-to-peer learning, I think that is the way in which people can feel part of something that's bigger than themselves.
And now I just want to clarify one point there. You said you encourage them to join my regenerative journey. That's not your personal experience. That's a bit of a program that you have, correct?
It's a program.
Talk
yes.
a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah. My regenerative journey was a project that was started with my friend Seo Yoshiharu-san. Together we are working at teaching how soils function, also how to do soil health assessments, encouraging farmers to learn about ways to improve their health of their soil through applying the principles of regenerative agriculture, and just giving them the opportunity to work together in their neighborhood with other farmers, to do this kind of experimenting together. That's been a project has been focused mostly in Hokkaido, and there's other farmers from other regions of Japan that are also now gaining interest in this. And I think in the coming year we're going to be shifting some of our workshops into the mainland of Japan. Farming is very, very different in the North Island of Hokkaido than it is on the main island. It's much more American-style agriculture here in Hokkaido, larger scale, 100 to 200 acres.
Yeah, which is large scale for Japan, not necessarily for Texas or Nebraska or something. But,
One of the things I didn't mention about in this broadcast is about the connections with the government researchers that are now getting interested in regenerative agriculture, and just kind of the same kind of experience that Gabe Brown and his group, they started doing research on their own, and then all of a sudden later on Ray Archuleta and others said, oh my goodness, what are you guys doing here? There's just government researchers are now getting interested in what we're doing. And I think many of the farmers are ahead of what the government researchers are. Mm-hmm. They're trying to catch up, and they're wondering how can they participate in what we're doing. So, but the time scale is really compressed. Like it was 4 or 5 years ago where we didn't have a word for regenerative agriculture, and now the researchers are getting interested in relatively quickly. So they're wondering what kind of testing is needed in order to help shift our soils, to regenerative. So on Saturday, the Kobayashi Sensei from Hokkaido University he proposed that we have a project called the 100 Farms Initiative, based upon John Lundgren's 1,000 Farms Initiative. He just whacked off a zero at the end.
That's still a big project.
Yeah. So we're influencing the universities and government researchers. We're leveraging them. We're pushing them in a particular direction. So it's really fun to know that these farmers are they're at the cutting edge, and they're really excited about the work that they're doing, to improve their own soils, but also in helping to push Japanese agriculture in a new direction. So.
Well, that's great, and it's really encouraging to know that this movement, whether you call it regenerative ag or earth healing agriculture, is not localized to one region or another, because it's the principles of creation that work everywhere. The practices are going to be different, and but that's the beauty, is that the creativity of whether it's an American farmer, Japanese farmer, or wherever, the creativity is there to figure out how to do the best practices to put these universal principles into play. So, Raymond, thank you for the work that you're doing to promote this in Japan, and I see that spreading, not just from your farm across the country, but I predict that you'll have an international influence, and you'll be able to really have an effect, in the larger region for these practices. So thank you for all the great work that you're doing. Thank you for being a friend to Green Cover, and for, anything we can do to help continue your journey. Just let us know. We would love to be part of it.
It's a real honor and a real privilege to share in the work of helping farmers to care for God's creation for future generations.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
That's a great one to end on. So thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of the Green Cover Podcast.
Thank you very much, Keith.